All right, we're sitting here with Gretchen Thompson. She is a performance science coordinator.
Yes.
Let me get that right. I'm going to start over for Leland. I'm sitting here with Gretchen Thompson. She is a performance science coordinator here at the University of Utah. We are at the eve of our Slide to Glory Combine for USA Bobsled, where we'll be doing our Spark Combine testing. Gretchen, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, what is a performance science coordinator?
Yeah, so I like to think of, performance science is really just the science of how are we performing, how can we get better, how can we stay healthy, all that kind of stuff. And so I would say a lot of what my role is really back end, leveraging the data and like really using it to be able to inform our decision making, right?
Sure.
I think sports science is a lot more than just, okay, like having this tech and using it on athletes and saying like, hey, we force plate tested today, but it's really getting dirty with the data.
Sure.
And saying, how can we use this? Like, are you really asymmetrical and that's gonna have an impact on your injury risk? Or hey, like, what's the lowest hanging fruit for where we might want to go if we're trying to improve performance? Like, what's gonna make you the best at your sport? And so I think the biggest thing is analyzing and then using that data.
Yeah.
So much more than just collecting it.
And talk a little bit about your athletic journey and any role that uncovering or getting into the science side might have played a role in your own journey.
Yeah, so I'd say I was always doing sports like my whole life growing up. Is one of those things like my parents just put my brother and I in a sport every single season. And so I did a ton of different sports. I did my t-ball days, I had my soccer days, my gymnastics days, some lacrosse, some swimming, all that kind of stuff.
So it sounds like a multi-sport or a all-sport kind of background.
Absolutely a multi-sport aura. And then I would say on the flip side, I was always really into science in school. I think that was always my strength. And so I kind of started to take a path in college of like, okay, what do I want to do? And so first I'll talk athletically. First it was like, okay, I'm going to play club lacrosse. I got really, I wouldn't say burned out about it, but I didn't love it. I'd had family that had rowed before. I'm from New England, so rowing is like kind of a big thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's try rowing.
The Ivy League, the historic.
Yeah, exactly. So I went to University of Vermont. They had a club rowing team there. And so I was just like, you know what, why not? Let me give it a go. So I did that whole thing. Had a really cool opportunity to study abroad. And when I studied abroad in Scotland, I actually rowed for a high performance team there. And that's when I like really learned like what it meant to train at this level, what it meant to perform at this level. And I think it's no secret that the UK and like Europe is really far ahead in sports science. And so at the same time that I was over there, I actually took a sports science class. And that was actually my first introduction. At this point, I was a bio major. I was a pre-med. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe medical school, but really realized sports science and how that got used in rowing, but then also became like a much better rower. And so then I kind of went down the path of, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to keep diving into this. So came back, graduated, got recruited and rowed Division I in grad school.
And how maybe did that even change your approach within the sport as you started learning more about the science, learning more about kind of the study and the educational part? How was that applied in practice?
I think it really made me understand the why. I think I'm someone that responds better to something if I understand why I'm doing it.
Sure.
And so understanding the difference of, rowing is it's really heavy on physiology, but it's also really heavy on biomechanics. And so understanding okay, why am I trying to go through this workout? Like, why am I erging for 100 minutes today, but it's like not that fast? And then tomorrow I'm going to do something really short, but really fast. And so understanding why I'm doing that and like how it should feel different in different cases to like really maximize your training. But then also, rowing is really a game of physics, right? At the end of the day, like, doesn't matter how fit you are if you can't figure out how to leverage your forces.
Sure.
And so that's what really got me into biomechanics. And so then when I was in grad school, I kind of specialized in biomechanics, and like really thinking about, like, as I'd get corrections for how to row better, I'd be thinking about how forces are translating better and how it's ultimately moving a boat.
And
So
so how do you think, here we talked a little bit and you mentioned in terms of your job and what you look for with athletes, stuff like
mhm.
asymmetries and just, development, kind of setting a baseline. What would that process look like for an athlete coming into Utah, or how
Yeah.
would you differentiate kind of an initial baseline and then what a plan would look like after that?
Yeah, so I think that that's something that we've actually been having a lot of discussions about as like a high performance unit here at Utah, right? And so when I say high performance, we're talking sports science, we're talking sports performance, athletic training, nutrition, psych and wellness. But how can we aggregate all this data and look holistically at an athlete? So we're really fortunate, and then we have a lot of different information that's coming in. Um, so, say someone comes in, they jump on the force plate, we see a huge asymmetry in their limbs. They're producing way more force with their right than their left. And then they go over to nutrition, we get a DEXA scan on them, and we're seeing, okay, well, there's significantly less muscle mass in that left leg than there is in the right leg.
Mm,
And so, in that case, we might say, okay, like probably our first plan of attack is going to be hypertrophy, right? Like build the muscle
yep.
tissue. Um, and then that's where like strength and conditioning coaches will get involved. That's where nutrition and the dietitians will get involved in terms of like how can we support that goal. Whereas if we had another athlete and we see that same asymmetry, but we don't see a difference in their DEXA with their muscle mass, then okay, maybe we just don't know how to use that.
Mm,
Like, is it an activation problem? And
mhm.
so then it kind of transitions, and maybe it's more like athletic training, motor learning. How can we focus on that?
Sure.
And so I think trying to never look at one metric or one test in an isolated setting,
Yeah.
but I mean, humans are really like an elaborate system,
Yeah.
um, and everything has to work together in order to function well. And
Mhm.
so we need to look at all those different parts if we're going to try to make a change.
Yeah. And you mentioned your backgrounds obviously came up way more multi-sport.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to the training and some of the baselines. Obviously, every athlete is individual, a unique kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
But are there any broad trends that you're seeing? We spoke a little bit before we started about stuff like specialization and athletes these days not having as much of a robust sporting background, really focused
Mm-hmm.
on, one, maybe two sports. Are there any overlying trends that you're seeing kind of broadly around athletes as they come in, whether on a sport basis or just general observation?
Um, I would say one of the things that's really stuck out to me recently is how athletes are really unfamiliar with testing
Mm,
and being able to do a movement, right? So I think one of the big tests that we do, especially in soccer players, is a Nordic test and trying to measure eccentric hamstring strength. And the number of athletes that really haven't ever done a Nordic and they have
yeah.
no idea what they're doing
Mm,
has been really challenging because I think it creates kind of dirty data, and that there's a significant learning effect. And
sure.
so I think that's what's been really hard is trying to overcome the learning effect and understand when we can look at a baseline and really make decisions from that versus does the baseline become kind of like your average or
Skewed,
your
yeah.
progression over
Mhm.
your first 4 weeks here, because that gives us enough time to like get through that learning phase and understand like really how you move. Um, so I'd say that's been a challenge. I think it's hard. We have a really vast array of athletes here, and like our sports all operate at a different level. And
Mhm.
so sometimes we get athletes with a really high and really great training age, and sometimes we get athletes with a pretty low training age. And depending on what that background of training is, has really changed what we've seen. Um, yeah.
And what are any like stories that could be on the top of your mind or that you would think of these tests being ran on athletes, and then, you don't have to necessarily mention the athlete by name, but have you seen any massive success outcomes by some of these baselines, just getting a
Mm,
read and doing a couple quick tweaks to really see a lot of performance increases pretty quickly? What have been some of the most exciting or things that you're maybe
yeah.
trying to template future, you know,
Yeah.
development around?
Um, I think specific cases, I think,
Or a sport or any
yeah,
type of
I think what's really
unlock.
cool is And it really sucks when an athlete comes in having been injured.
Sure.
There's like a lot of injuries I think that take a huge toll
Yeah.
on athletes, especially like an ACL, for example. And so seeing an athlete come in having gone through physical therapy maybe like years ago or even pretty recently in high school, in more of like an isolated setting, and they come in and like we're still seeing like these big asymmetries all over the place, so they're still like maybe they are symmetrical but they're really weak, and so catching that and then immediately implementing a plan. And so I have had some cases where athletes have come in post ACL at another institution or wherever, and we saw massive hamstring discrepancy. Like we're talking 50%.
Wow.
Right? And if you're a soccer player and that's happening, like
Yeah.
you're expected to hit your maximum velocity in a match. And if your hamstring's super weak, all of a sudden we're putting you at an increased risk of hamstring strains or another ACL, or even just like seeing not only is it weak, but it's also asymmetrical. And so we immediately put her on a program to work on strengthening and hypertrophy, and we've seen some improvements in that hamstring strength.
Sure.
We've also been really intentional about like not just in the weight room but also what we're doing on the field in terms of how are we building into full field games and matches during the season using Catapult and like GPS wearables.
Yep.
And so far we've stayed healthy.
Yeah.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
But that's been super rewarding to be able to catch that, and then the fact that we were all attacking it from different angles within the sports performance team has been really cool.